We have referred to the revolution in detail in our last episode. I shall be very brief, quite naturally. Now, the first decade of the 20th century witnessed a nationwide crisis in China. Foreign aggressiveness was receiving no check, and there was a merciless plunder of the people, and it brought China to almost to the brink of national collapse. And that naturally led to a series of outbreaks of different types, tax riots, movements of various types, etc. But all these movements were crushed, and when movements were crushed, new movements also began. So there was no break, actually, no break. But despite the failure of all these movements, it was these movements who definitely kept alive the revolutionary ideas, the revolutionary fervor among the people. There is no doubt about it. Now, meanwhile, important developments had also been taking place within the ruling clique, because the Manchu ruling clique felt, in the face of these revolutionary outbreaks, that some concessions should be given to the intellectuals, at least to some sections of the population, in order to keep it down, keep all these movements down, and to safeguard their position. And so we have the reforms, later Qing reforms, particularly on August 27, 1908, a 9-year program of constitutional reform was promulgated. And the main aim was to take China to a parliamentary system of government gradually. But within a few months, in November 1908, both Empress Dowager Zhu Si and the imprisoned Emperor Guangxu, both of them died. And an infant whose name was Puyi, he sat on the throne. Puyi was the last emperor. There was a film entitled Last Emperor, and that was Puyi. And incidentally, this Puyi was the person whom the Japanese installed in Manchuria when they set up the Manchukuo puppet government after 1931, after they captured large parts of China. Crisis of the Manchu rulers became more serious than ever before. And Sun Yat-sen had been preparing himself, along with his associates, for the final showdown with the imperial army. In September 1911, there was an uprising in Sichuan, and within a month, 13 provinces had been lost to the empire. One uprising was followed by another, and in all these uprisings, those military students in Japan who came back to China, and they were stationed in several cantonments. Many of them revolted because they were influenced by that ideology, anti-Manchu ideology, thanks to Sun Yat-sen's revolutionary propaganda in Japan at that time. Now, after the revolution of 1911, the Manchu rulers had to step down. That was the end of the Manchu rule, and they recalled Wan Shikai. Wan Shikai was a warlord-minded official who was recalled as the new Chinese premier. And Wan Shikai favored a settlement with Sun Yat-sen's organization. And so the Republican form of government of China was formed, and Sun Yat-sen became the first president of the Republic of China, and the date was 1st January 1912. That was formed in Nanking. Now, after the formation of the Republican form of government in Nanking, Nanking in South China, China came to be divided into two parts. In South China, with Nanking as the capital, Sun Yat-sen, the Republicans were at the helm of affairs, whereas the North China, with Peking as the capital, it was under Wan Shikai. So China was divided into North and South China, with two different types of government existing in each side. Now, despite its progressive character, the revolution also suffered from certain limitations. Now, Tung Hui program, in fact, recognized all the privileges that the foreign powers enjoyed previously. It never de-recognized any of the privileges that they enjoyed. And the other part was that the character of the Chinese society also did not change. Though the Manchus were sent packing, the Manchu rule was associated with a feudal rule, but a feudal society remained virtually intact. So foreign powers remained, foreign control still was a reality. Feudal system was a reality. So even though it was a bourgeois democratic revolution, it was incomplete. And Sun Yat-sen also could not unite the country because the country was divided into two parts. And in the interest of unity, Sun Yat-sen resigned from presidency in favor of Yuan Shikai on 14th February 1912, just 1.5 months after he became the president. He abdicated in favor of Yuan Shikai. Yuan Shikai, he set up a military dictatorship in China. And he trampled underfoot all democratic norms. And he also initiated dialogues with international banking institutions. And he also depended on bank loans. Now, it was in 1913 that it became very clear that Yuan Shikai has totally betrayed the Chinese nation. And so Sun Yat-sen launched his second revolution after that. And he mobilized an army in South China. But after months of fighting, his army was defeated. It ended in failure. And the main reason, again, for this debacle was that agrarian issues were not properly addressed. And after gaining victory, Yuan Shikai banned Coaming Ten. In fact, after the revolution of 1911 and the formation of the republic, Tung Hui was renamed Kuomintang Party by Sun Yat-sen. And this Kuomintang was banned by Yuan Shikai after gaining victory in the second revolution over Sun Yat-sen. Now, that was followed by the First World War, coming of the First World War, and a series of new problems cropped up, both outside as also inside China. Japan joined Allied forces in a war, and the Japanese ambassador to China, whose name was Hyoki Eki, he presented the infamous 21 demands in January 1915. The infamous 21 demands were placed before Yuan Shikai. And essentially the 21 demands stood for colonization of large parts of China by Japan. That was the essence of the 21 demands. These 21 demands were made public, and there was a public outcry. A very important intellectual movement developed, and which came to be known as the May 4th movement of 1919. Now, meanwhile, changes also came about in the thinking of Sun Yat-sen. As a result of new developments, he also, there was a transformation in his own outlook also. And by that time, there was the October Revolution in Russia. And from 1921, he began to study the October Revolution. And then the Communist Party of China was also formed in 1921. And so he drastically revised his own views about his program. And that was the period when we have the three major policies, Sun Yat-sen's three major policies. Manchu rule was no longer there, so everything had to be reorganized, reformulated anew. And among those his three major policies, we have alliance with Soviet Russia, alliance with the Communist Party of China, and assistance to the workers and peasants movement. So one can say that he tended towards socialistic ideas. He tended towards communism. He was not a communist. He was, of course, not a member of the Communist Party of China. But, of course, his alliance with the Soviet Union, his ties with the Communist Party of China, that implied, of course, his anti-imperialist attitude. Quite clearly, there was no doubt about it. His three principles of the people also underwent change. Manchu rule was no longer there, and now the foreigners were the foreign imperialist powers, no doubt about it. And he introduced the land to the tiller program, a definitely bourgeois, it was a democratic demand from the side of the peasantry. So he addressed the problem of the peasantry during that period. From then on, there is no doubt about it. Now, so Sun Yat-sen became anti-imperialist. Sun Yat-sen also became anti-feudal. His new program was definitely anti-imperialist and anti-feudal. And the program of the Communist Party of China was also anti-imperialist and anti-feudal. So there were common grounds. Though there were two different parties, the Kuomintang and the CPC, Communist Party of China, they had common grounds. And so there was a formation of the first United Front, 1924 to 1927, January 1924 to 1927, between the Kuomintang and the CPC, that is the Communist Party of China. And a new revolutionary government was set up in Canton. And there was also the formation of a military academy known as the Huampua Military Academy. And in this Huampua Military Academy, Kuomintang was represented by Chiang Kai-shek. That was the period of the coming of Chiang Kai-shek, who became the leader of Kuomintang after the death of Sun Yat-sen. And Communist Party of China was represented by Zhou Enlai. Zhou Enlai, who played a very important role in the Chinese Revolution, and who became the first Chinese premier, and who remained the Chinese premier till he breathed his last. So the main aim of this first United Front was to fight against the northern warlords. And there was a northern expedition with that revolutionary army. Sun Yat-sen, however, did not live long, and it was on 12th March 1925 that he died. He died of cancer of the liver. C.M. Wilber wrote a book on Sun Yat-sen, Sun Yat-sen, the Frustrated Patriot. And in that book, he called Sun Yat-sen a frustrated patriot because most of his life, most of his career was marked by discouragement in his efforts to bring about revolution. He had two important successes. One was, of course, the end of Manchu rule. He nurtured that hope to put an end to Manchu rule, and that he could. And there he was successful. And his second achievement was the reorganization of the Kuomintang. He started the process of reorganization of the Kuomintang, but he could not complete it. So it was incomplete. But these were his two achievements. But in all other cases, he was confronted with failures. One revolutionary outbreak after another failed. It was crushed. He was a fugitive. He moved. He was driven from pillar to post. He went to Europe, then came back, then moved to Japan, and then came to China. It was in this way. That was what his revolutionary career was all about. And it was also very painfully difficult to raise money. He raised money from the overseas Chinese. That was one source, not the only source, but that was one source. And it was difficult also to get money from the people, from the overseas Chinese. And the Republican government that is set up was also a failure. It was corrupted, it was stolen by Yuan Shikai, it was corrupted by the bureaucrats and the militaries. And in fact, nothing came out of his plans. Because though he formed a government, after 1911, no foreign government gave any recognition to Sun Yat-sen's government. Though he believed that by abdicating from presidency, he would be able to unify China, but he could not unify China because of the policy pursued by Yuan Shikai. Wilber again has described Sun Yat-sen's life as a somber story of shattered dreams. But the fact is that his dreams were not dreamt in vain, and the policy that is pursued, the dreams that he dreamt, were carried forward in a new historical condition after the formation of the Communist Party of China under Mao's leadership. And in fact, the main essence of the policy of the Communist Party of China during the stage of New Democratic Revolution was, of course, anti-feudal and anti-imperialist, whose essence was agrarian revolution, which was more or less similar to the policy for which Sun Yat-sen fought, at least during the later period of his life.
So can we in any way blame the failure of the revolt to the ideological weakness of Sun Yat-sen?
To a very large extent, because since one thing is that there were, of course, elements within Sun Yat-sen's organization, people within Sun Yat-sen's organization were very critical of foreign powers. But there were no public statements. Publicly, they did not say that they were very critical of the foreign powers. They avoided. And that is the reason why Sun Yat-sen could not enlist the support of a large number of other progressive forces. So this ideological weakness definitely played an important role.